saves millions of dollars by reusing rail in our track upgrades. That's good for business and good for the environment as well. Rail recovery trains play an important role in enabling us to create a cost-effective rail recycling program. There are two types of rail recovery train, the IRG, shown here, and the QRG, described later in this video. Rail recovery trains are designed to carry long rails. Each rail can move with respect to the other rails in the load, as the consist negotiates curves in the track geometry. For this reason, it's very important that when loading long rails, the correct loading procedure is followed. The IRG consists are 7 wagons long. Each wagon is fitted with a centrally mounted, hydraulically powered post-jib crane. The consist can lift rail from either side of the track in lengths up to 109.8 metres. If shorter rails are to be carried, the consist should be shortened by removing the required number of intermediate wagons, as per the table, to coincide with the rail length to be transported. The IRGEs, or terminal wagons, have steel bulkheads to longitudinally restrain the rail within the confines of the consist. There must always be an IRGE wagon at either end of any consist. Correct operation of rail recovery trains starts with the preparation of the part-worn rail for transport. Safety is paramount, and rail must be grouped trackside to allow safe passage for maintenance workers around the rails. The rails should be upright and ideally toe-to-toe. They should be lined up at one end, and when using the normal 7-wagon consist, rail lengths should be between 106 and 109.8 metres. Rails shorter than 106 metres must not be loaded on a 7-wagon consist. Preparation for transport involves ensuring nothing on the rail can foul any other rail or any part of the wagons during transport. Angled fish plates should be shorn back to the line of the foot, as should any protruding bolts or other fittings. Badly crippled rails must not be loaded. Transportation of this rail is a waste of time and money and can significantly reduce the capacity of the rail set. The supervisor must assess whether crippled rail can be salvaged prior to loading. Where rail is to be picked from rail stacks rather than from trackside, the procedure is similar. Just recapping rail preparation. The important things to remember are clear access around the rails, rails upright and toe-to-toe, rail lined up at one end, and all protrusions beyond the foot of the rail must be removed. Remember, the decision to load any rail rests with the supervisor. If the rail has protrusions, is badly crippled, or is not the correct length, it must not be loaded. All of these points are crucial to the safe operation of the rail recovery train. Staff requirements for operations of a rail recovery train are 1 supervisor who oversees the operation, 7 operators, 1 for each crane, and sufficient clampers on the ground to attend to rail clamps. The number required will be determined by the supervisor. The rail recovery train crew must secure the appropriate keys for the train prior to the day of operation. The rail pickup starts with correct positioning of the consist alongside the rails. The supervisor will position the consist for best lifting conditions. Each crane is hydraulically operated from a small diesel engine located under the wagon floor. The fuel, engine oil, hydraulic oil and battery electrolyte levels must be checked before starting the engine. Some engines have fan belts and these should be checked for damage. After completion of the checks, unlock the control box on the crane post and start the engine. Once the engine is running, release the jib securing chains and stow them in the box on the jib end. Press the down button to lower the rail clamp, releasing it from the clamping point. Unlock the jib locking pin and manually swing the jib out 90 degrees over the side of the wagon. Generally, the jib slewing action should not be locked in the 90 degrees position, as this may damage the jib. At this point, and prior to use, the rail clamp and chain should be visually inspected for defects. Any defects should be repaired before the hoist is used for lifting. The IRG consists have two types of spacer plates. The first type is a dog bone shape and is fitted over and restrained by the stanchions. These dog bone spacers should be stored in their specific storage compartments. The second type of spacer rotates about a central post. The rotating spacers are both stored and used in the deployed position. IRG or intermediate wagons have two dog bone and two rotating spacer plates between layers. IRGE or terminal wagons only require two rotating spacer plates. Preparation for loading involves clearing spacer plates from the load area of the wagons. To clear the rotating spacer plates, lift up the doors on the spacer plate restrainers, then rotate spacer plates to a longitudinal position and close the restrainer doors. Loading preparation also includes ensuring floors are clear of ballast or other debris and ensuring the tie-down straps are out of the way and can't be fouled. When all this is done, traverse the hoist out until it's positioned directly over the rail to be lifted, then lower the rail clamp. The clamper then places the rail clamp over the rail directly beneath the hoist and replaces the locking pin, and the rail is ready for lifting. If the rail is beyond the end of the jib and has to be dragged, make sure the hoist is positioned at the end of the jib and the winch provides the drag movement. So, just revising the key steps in preparing the IRG for operation. Carry out pre-start checks. Release and stow the jib securing chains. Release the rail clamp and swing the jib out 90 degrees. Clear and prepare the loading area and position and pin the rail clamp. The IRG consist is now ready to lift the rail. Lifting a long length of rail requires care and coordination, with all crane operators taking their cues from the supervisor, while keeping an eye on the rail itself. The supervisor will use either two-way radio or visual signals to control the lifting process. On a signal from the supervisor, start the lift, adjusting hoist speed to keep the rail as straight as possible. Now is the best time to remove any ballast or debris caught on the foot of the rail. Smooth movement is the key to effective operation of the cranes. The rail should be lifted until it's high enough to clear the wagon stanchions. At this point, with the rail stationary underneath the hoist, the supervisor will give the instruction to traverse the rail in, ready for stacking. Once again, careful attention is required from the crane operators to create a smooth movement while keeping the rail as straight as possible. The rail is traversed in along the jibs until it's over its final position for transport, and then lowered carefully into place. The consist must be loaded from either side in turn, one layer at a time, to keep the load in balance. Loading of the rails must be foot to foot and according to the supervisor's instruction. Rails should be loaded with an equal distance from each end of the rail to the end bulkheads. Each layer of the load must be complete and spacer plates put in place before the next layer is started. Place the dog bone spacer plates over the stanchions, 2 per IRG layer, and deploy the rotating spacer plate. To deploy them, lift the doors on the spacer plate restrainers, then rotate the spacer plates across the wagon and close the doors on the restrainers. All spacer plate locations must have plates in place, 2 per IRG layer and 2 per IRGE layer. The only layer that may be partially filled is the top layer. Any other part-filled layers will not be accepted for travel. The load must be evenly loaded, with equal numbers of rails on either side. The IRG consist may carry up to 4 layers of rail, depending on rail mass. When the consist is fully loaded, secure the load using the tie-down straps, ensuring the steel protectors are located over the outer rail on the upper layer, and that the plastic protectors are located over the steel protectors. Thread the strap end into the slot in the winch and tighten the strap until quite firm. Do not over-tighten. The rails must be allowed to move in transit, and over-tightening could damage the straps. Manually rotate the jib back to the travel position and lock it with the locking pin. Secure the rail clamp to the clamping point and tension the chain. Secure the jib end with the tie-down chains Then switch off the diesel engine, remove the ignition keys and close the control box. Ensure that the engine compartment is also closed and locked. When the supervisor is satisfied the train is correctly loaded and secured, the authority to travel is signed and committed to the traffic system. So, the key points in the lift are: take commands from the supervisor. Work as a team to keep the rail straight. Load rail toe to toe. Keep rail equidistant from end bulkheads. Load by alternate sides, and secure equipment properly before travel. Any faults in any of the IRG's equipment or systems should be noted by the supervisor and reported to the appropriate authority. In this instance, the Logistics Officer, Mainline Freight Division. Any faults noted are to include accurate details of the fault along with the wagon number involved so the fault can be easily traced. Accuracy is important, as fault finding can take days if incorrect information is provided. With loading, certain preparations have to be made before the arrival of the rail recovery train. The same applies to unloading. A set of appropriate keys must be available prior to the day of operation. Before the train is scheduled, the supervisor must inspect the unloading locations to determine their suitability and will change plans if necessary. The rail unloading process is effectively the reverse of the loading, and again, careful and precise movements are the key. Before you arrive at the location, find a suitable spot and carry out pre-start checks for the diesel engines. Check all fluid levels and fan belts if applicable. When the rail recovery train arrives at the designated unloading location, the supervisor should advise the train crew where to stop the train. Then unlock the control box on the crane post and start the engine. Once the engine is running, release the jib securing chains and stow them. Tie-down straps should be released and stowed so they can't foul the unloading operation. Free the jib by releasing the locking pin and the rail clamp. Then swing the jib out 90 degrees over the side of the wagon. At this point and prior to use, the rail clamp and chain should be visually inspected for defects. Any defects should be repaired before that hoist is used for lifting. Position the hoist over the first rail to be unloaded and lower the lifting chain. Attach the rail clamps to the rail and make sure the locking pins are secure. The rail is now ready for unloading. As with loading, it's important to keep the rails straight and to use smooth movements. On the supervisor's signal, all 7 crane operators lift the rail until it's high enough to clear the stanchions. Then, again on the supervisor's signal, the hoists are traversed out along the jibs until the rail is over the required position on the ground. And on the supervisor's further signal, the rail is lowered evenly and steadily. Keep an eye along the rail and use the crane controls to adjust speed and keep the rail as straight as possible. Unloading should be from alternate sides of each layer to even the load on the consist. With the top row unloaded, stow the dog bone spacer plates in the correct storage positions. Rotate the rotating plates out of the way and continue the unloading of alternate sides until all of the rail is on the ground. All that remains then is to prepare the IRG consist for travel again. Lift the rail clamp to the upper position. Rotate the jib to the travel position. Locate the hoist directly above the clamping point. Lock the jib in the travel position. Attach the rail clamps to the clamping points. Tension the chain. And secure the jib end with the tie-down chains. Switch off the diesel engine, remove the ignition key, close the control box, and ensure the engine cabinet is locked. Open the doors on the spacer plate restrainers. Rotate the spacer plates to the deployed position and close the doors. Insert the tie-down straps into the winches and wind them up sufficiently to make them safe for travel. The IRG consist is now ready for its next rail load. The IRG is the most commonly used type of rail recovery train in QR, but there is another type of unit in the system, the QRG. While the broad principles of loading and unloading remain the same, there are some important equipment differences. For a start, the QRG is electrically operated. It has a consist of 8 wagons, 7 crane wagons and a power car. The power car houses a diesel alternator which powers the whole consist via wagon-to-wagon cables. To operate the QRG, check fluid levels in the engine, then use the key switch to start the engine. The press button powers up the train, and the green light confirms the power circuit is activated. Throughout the QRG, red emergency buttons will cut the power circuit if pressed. Power can only be restored after the emergency buttons have been reset. To reset the emergency stop in the power car, turn the collar behind the button to release it. To cancel an emergency stop on the crane operator's pendant, turn the button anti-clockwise. Once the emergency controls have been reset, the train circuit has to be reactivated from the power car. If there is no power to an individual hoist unit, check the circuit breakers on the individual wagon power box or on the hoist trolley assembly. If there is still no power, call an electrician. Unlike the IRG consist, which has centre-mounted cranes, the QRG consist has side-mounted cranes. This means the QRG consist can only lift rail from one side, the side away from the crane mounting. The QRG consist is limited to 3 layers instead of 4 layers for the IRG. It has only the dog bone spacer plates. They are used between rail layers at 4 locations on each intermediate wagon and 2 on each terminal wagon. Again, spacer plates must be used to separate all rail layers. Basic operation of the QRG consist is very similar to the IRG consist. There's an operator's platform at every crane. Before operation, the platform needs to be lowered into the operating position and the handrail unfolded to provide a safe working platform. After loading or unloading is completed, the platform must be locked in the vertical position for travel. If required, the cranes can be relocated to the opposite side of the wagon, but this is a significant operation. This procedure should only be performed if there is no alternative. The IRG and QRG rail recovery trains are helping achieve QR's aim of operating a world-class rail system. If you follow correct operating procedures, they are safe and effective tools in our business.